We're going to talk right now with Chrysta Castañeda. She is a legal and communications expert, and she knows these things, so we're going to get her take on it. Good morning, Chrysta.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it.
Happy to be with you.
All right, so, when all this went down, I saw the folks on the far right were all going, this is crazy. They had no legal standing to do it. What's your take on it when those judges came in and said, wait a minute, pump the brakes?
Well, let's talk about the standing issue.
Okay.
For those who aren't lawyers, that means whoever brought the lawsuit, do they have a right to complain about what the government did? And so the state of Hawaii brought a lawsuit saying that our tourism and our universities and our economy is going to be hurt by this action, in that we recruit from these places, we need professors from these places, we need doctors from these places, and people come to Hawaii for tourism. So that's the economic injury that they said they had that allowed them to bring the lawsuit. Okay, so that's step number one.
Got it.
Step number two is, so what is the complaint? The complaint is that the First Amendment of the Constitution says that the United States cannot prefer one religion over another. And so the question is this a religious ban? And that's where the really interesting part comes in, because never have I seen a case where the president's statements as a candidate saying he's going to invoke a Muslim ban were used as evidence in this kind of an inquiry. That's the interesting thing.
But if it's never been, then how could they almost cite it that was part of the reasoning for stopping it?
Well, you have to look at what is the intent of the statute. That's commonplace in these kinds of inquiries. What's the intent of the executive order? What's the intent of the statute?
But how could they judge the intent of the president, what he might have said 6 months prior when he was running, versus them going through the Justice Department? I'm sure Jeff Sessions had a lot to do with and his staff on getting that, and they just stated it was to protect the country from these countries that don't have proper vetting, right?
Well, they did state that. The question is whether the United States had enough evidence that was the case. And so it was two things that came together. There wasn't sufficient evidence that this particular ban, 90 days and 120 days for certain types of activities, would keep the country safer. So the judge said, you haven't proved that, United States, and we've got all these statements about how what this really is a Muslim ban, which is unconstitutional. That's the way the court came out. You can disagree with it, but that is the legal analysis.
All right. So a lot of folks saying, though, this judge sitting on the bench in Hawaii and Maryland, they're a little again, we get into, why are judges seemingly political by nature now? I know they're trying to say they're not, but it sure seems like it is.
Yeah, I mean, what they're increasingly facing are political questions. I think Judge Gorsuch yesterday in his hearings explained that all anybody's ever trying to do as a judge is apply the law. But the problem is that I think they're increasingly faced with what are essentially political questions.
All right. Well, then what about this? Alan Dershowitz coming out immediately following that, saying he's putting his reputation on the line, saying, I believe that if this gets to the Supreme Court, it's going to be thrown out.
Thrown out by the Supreme Court?
Right.
The appeal will be thrown out?
Yes.
Of course, that's just prognostication. Who knows what the Supreme Court will do? But it's very interesting. If it came up right now, we're in a 4-4 court. They may not agree to take it.
Oh, all right. So as it stands right now, what are the president's options? Is he just forget it and they're going to change their vetting procedures anyways. They've already done that a little bit. They're banning certain electronics on airplanes from X number of countries. I think even more than the 6 or 7 that they had in that particular order.
So, yes, and I think that's been some of the suggestions all along, was these big, bold steps that, of course, that's what people elected him to do if they voted for him. Those are problematic. The actual things like you just talked about right now, there is a specific credible threat, apparently, about these laptops coming from certain countries. So they can stop that. They can keep the United States safer by those kinds of measures that are not so likely to be found unconstitutional.
But is it also possible that somebody like that same person who brought the lawsuit in Hawaii could say, well, wait a minute, my aunt who hasn't been here in 10 years wants to visit the country and she owns a laptop. Why are you stopping her from bringing it? I mean, is that another lawsuit we could be seeing?
Less likely, right? Because the intrusion on people's personal lives is smaller, and everybody, Muslim, Christian, otherwise, who's flying from our country into those countries, or two, they're not allowed to use the laptops.
Okay.
So it's less facially obvious that it's an attack on somebody's religious orientation.
All right, but another premise that was involved in all this, which I don't understand, is I'm just gonna, I don't know. Let's just say it's Yemen, for sake of argument. And if we believe our State Department or our Justice Department or those on the front line believe that their vetting procedures don't match up with ours, why can't we stop them from coming in until we believe that their vetting procedures are good?
Well, that's an excellent question. If the statute were geared towards, the executive order were geared towards, let's have a halt on these places whose vetting processes don't match the United States, that might be constitutional. But would it be limited to those 7 countries, or would it be across the board? Someplace in South America.
Yeah. Well, my thought is, could we set a standard and say everybody has to follow these, or you don't get into our country? At least these standards, which can be, whatever they happen to be. It just seems to me that's what he was trying to get across in the first place.
You've got many excellent suggestions, and I'm no expert in immigration, but again, all of these smaller measures may be found more likely to be constitutional and actually produce some safety improvements.
Oh my! Well, this is it is just like little crossing hairs, if you will, splitting hairs, if you will, on all and that's what legal questions are all about, anyways, aren't they? I mean, when it boils right down to it.
I'm a lawyer. I practice law every day in addition to being a communications advisor. And, the legal system tries very hard to get it right. If you're not a part of it, it can seem like there's a lot of little splitting of hairs. But we've been working on this system for a very long time to achieve the best justice that we as human beings know how to achieve, and I still believe in it.
Well, that is encouraging, because when I'm watching Gorsuch in front of the the Senate being grilled on questions that just blow me away sometimes, you sometimes wonder. But that's the Senate. That's not in the judicial proceedings. I thought Judge Gorsuch handled most of these questions very well, and he's talking about sounding like what you're saying, trying to be very fair in everything he does and looking at every decision and weighing it heavily.
Exactly. And sometimes bad facts produce bad results. That's a thing that's commonly known and said in the legal community. You get strange results because you may have a very strange case.
All right. Well, Chrysta Castañeda, thank you so much. By the way, where can people find you? I know you have a website. Would be pretty easy if they want to find out who you are, a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. CanterburyCommunications.com.
All right. Thank you, Chrysta, so much for joining
Thank you.
us. Have a good day.
Bye.